Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AI Risk Reward Podcast with your host, Alec Crawford. And our very special guest today is Ron Green, co founder and CTO of Kung Fu AI. Welcome, Ron.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Hey, before we get started, I got to ask because you got your computer science degree around the same time as me. What was your first personal computer?
My very, very first computer that I owned was a TI 99. Yeah, I know. I think it had something like 16K of memory or something like that. It might have been,
Wow.
32K. And uh, it had no long-term memory, and I saved up, and I eventually bought a cassette tape that you probably remember this, and you could write programs, and you could press record, and it would record it back to the tape, and heaven help you if you didn't line it up exactly and you overwrote the previous program or you half loaded the new one. But I loved it so much, and I don't even know why.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Yeah, I remember the tapes. I remember getting my first 5-inch floppy disk, which like
Oh,
failed half the time. You'd have to
yeah.
save it like on 3 disks to make sure you got it. Yeah,
Yep.
it was crazy. And I remember, when the hard case 3-inch discs came out, they were much more reliable, but they'd still fail occasionally. And the lay people, shall we say, did not realize that they could fail. So I've literally remember my girlfriend at the time, now wife, lost a term paper because it was saved on one little 3-inch floppy disk. I'm like, you didn't save it more than once? Like thinking that was obvious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not obvious, not obvious, right?
Well, I remember
And
too, like when you booted up the original Macintosh, which my girlfriend had at the time, you were just swapping disks. You spent 10 minutes just swapping disks trying to get it to just boot up.
crazy, crazy. Yeah, it's so easy now compared to then.
It really
And
is.
so obviously you went to UT Austin to get your bachelor's, and then I'm thinking like from there to the University of Sussex to get your master's of science in evolutionary and adaptive systems. What is up with that?
Yeah. So, this is back in the mid 1990s, and the um second AI winter was kind of setting in, and I was really passionate about a few things. I was passionate about artificial intelligence, and I was really passionate about like adaptive systems and evolutionary systems, things like genetic
Mm.
algorithms and genetic programming. And I knew I wanted to get a master's specifically in that. I didn't want to go do a computer science master's with sort of a focus on these things. And there were like three programs in the world where you could do this. It was like the University of Michigan, I can't remember the third one, and then Sussex. And so I was like, packed up my bag, and I moved over to England, and it was one of the best choices of my life. It was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, except you couldn't see any Longhorns games over there at that time.
No, there were no Longhorn games over there. You movies came out 6 months later. I when we moved back to America, my wife and I, we couldn't believe all the music that people were listening to we'd never heard of. It was the cultural divide was much bigger then than it is now.
Yeah, pretty wild. Um, so, given your journey in computer science and AI, do you believe formal education is overrated for succeeding in the tech industry today, especially with so many online resources available?
I think it really depends upon the person and what that person is trying to get out of it. I love
Mhm.
the fact that there's not a barrier to entry. Like you can go, you can change careers and go into software at any point you want to. You don't have to pass some exam. And I like that, and I hope it stays that way forever. At the same time, I think that um, I know I did at UT. They had this such a firm theoretical foundation in computer science that it has really served me well my entire career. In fact, I remember graduating, and it was only years later, it was like 3 or 4 years later before I realized, oh, so that's why they were teaching me all these different things. They were essentially saying, look, technology fads will come and go, but if you understand these things at the deeper, theoretical level, you'll be set up for life. And it was really true.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I did take some super theoretical graduate level classes, which I would just throw in the dustbin, but everything on databases and
Yeah.
operating systems and things like that, and data structures and coding. I think
Well,
that's all remains legit.
Yeah, so Dijkstra, very famous computer scientist, he was teaching at the University of Texas at the time, and he was really into formal proofs. And I would say the one thing that we did as a part of my undergraduate degree that was a bit of a miss was they focused really hard on trying to get formal proofs of program correctness. And it was incredible. I wrote a proof one time. It was like 2 pages in it to prove that this function that took two numbers and divided them and returned the answer was correct. And it was just painful. And I think
Yeah.
that was maybe the one big theoretical miss of that experience for me.
Yeah, I had the same kind of experience, and don't ask me what a pumping lemma is anymore to do with Turing machines. But
Yeah.
um, and you also host a podcast called Hidden Layers. What's the theme of that podcast?
Yeah, so it's called Hidden Layers. It's based on it's a little play on the name of the hidden layers of a neural network, of course. And we focus exclusively on artificial intelligence, and we talk about the tech and the people. So we'll explore month to month emerging trends, emerging technologies, important white papers, and then we have a guest on once a month, and we'll dig into their work in artificial intelligence and the things that they see coming around the corner.
Wow, that's super cool. That sounds great. Now, after you graduated with your master's from University of Sussex, what did you end up doing right after that?
Let's see. So we moved back to America, and I joined a startup that was a spin out of a really big telecommunications company. I had worked in the telecommunication industry, like in between undergrad and going to grad school. And they were really interested in my, brand new shining AI
Mm,
degree and how we might apply that to different telecommunication challenges. And that was just a blast. They were some of the smartest people I've ever had the honor of working with in my life. I got to work with there. Um, and then a couple years after that, the dot com wave hit, and that just sucked all the attention and money out of AI. And all anybody really wanted at that point was to figure out how to get rich online, through some dot com adventure.
yeah, exactly. Like ad.com to your company name, or now it's ad.ai to your company name.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Um, so before that, though, you mentioned when we were talking earlier, you mentioned a book called The Selfish Gene, and so pitch our listeners on that and why it had such an impact on you.
Oh yeah. So I read The Selfish Gene. I think I read it in college. Might have been high
Mhm.
school, but I think it was in college. It's by Richard Dawkins, and it's basically this uh, sort of popular science book on genetics and how you can look at um, natural selection through different lenses, and one of them is through the lens of sort of the gene, going all the way down to the gene level. And he makes this incredible case that natural selection at its core could be viewed essentially as genes propagating themselves. The genes themselves are actually what is being propagated, and we, including our bodies and our minds and all of our experiences, are emergent artifacts of that selective pressure. But and it's not really the case that we're um, uh, the core fundamental foundational thing that is being selected on and propagated. And it blew my mind. And it really, we talked about my going to grad school at Sussex, and how there was an evolutionary component to that aspect of artificial intelligence. And it was really all started from the selfish gene. It blew my mind. It was one of those. It was one of those books that altered how I saw reality. That's not an exaggeration. It truly altered how I saw reality. And to this day, it's one of my top recommendations for people to read if they haven't checked it out yet.
Yeah, I read it about the same time. Very, very cool book. And then you mentioned also uh, Demis Hassabis, who's leading DeepMind,
Yeah.
AlphaFold, a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, talk about that a little bit. Super cool stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Demis just won the Nobel Prize, and I think really deservingly so. He and John Doerr for their work in essentially leveraging artificial intelligence to understand protein folding. In particular, something called AlphaFold. There's AlphaFold 1, 2, and 3. Um, and the reason this is so important is, we're all told, in biology in high school that, proteins are the foundation of life. It is really not an exaggeration, to a real extent. We're just a bunch of proteins. And the challenge with that is that proteins are very, very complex, and the process of going from DNA and producing proteins within our cells is really complicated, because as the proteins themselves are being transcoded, they affect, right? They have, electrical properties, and those chemical electrical properties impact how it's shaped, and the shape of the protein determines the chemical properties of the protein. And so this is, for over 50 years, this has been considered a grand challenge in biology, is to understand how a sequence of amino acids, there's only 20 amino acids, how, if I give you, let's say, something small like 100 sequence amino acid, what protein will that turn into? And very little progress was made on that, until I think it was 2018 when AlphaFold came out originally, and it was a quantum leap in capabilities. And they followed that up a few years later, just a couple years later, with AlphaFold 2. And at that point, even skeptics of using AI within biology and computational biology in general, I think were convinced that, yeah, this was the real deal. And it's only been extended since with AlphaFold 3, and now we're already seeing just amazing uses. I have to share one thing that I just think's really amazing that's associated with this, which is the University of Texas at Austin, the PhD led BioML group. Biology machine learning group. They held a hackathon, and we co-sponsored and helped with this summer, where we were leveraging these open source models to predict protein folding. And there was a contest, a hackathon, to develop custom proteins to treat cancer. And we are synthesizing all of the candidates. There were thousands of amino acid sequence submitted, and we had 63 different countries participate. And we'll know, yeah, we'll know the final results here in Q1 of 25, and we're announce the winners. And this is unbelievable. 3 years ago, the idea that you could hold a hackathon to use free tools to do protein folding, unbelievable. That would have been an entire PhD.
Wow, that is wild and super exciting. I mean, I think advances in healthcare from AI are going to be tremendous over the next few years, and obviously we have to be cautious to keep it out of the wrong hands as
Right.
well. Now, talk a little bit about your current role at Kung Fu AI as a co-founder and CTO.
Yeah, so Kung Fu AI, we are over 7 years old at this point. It's kind of amazing. We started from day one with the focus on artificial intelligence. So we're a service consultant engineering strategy company. We help our
Mhm.
clients build custom AI solutions and do custom AI strategy development for them, and have from day one. What's funny is, I remember when we started the company in early 2018, we thought, you know, this is going to be a very, very crowded space. And, it was shocking. It was like 3, 4, 5 years before people really started waking up to the fact that this revolution within AI was real, and it was going to affect every business. And, we went from, having to kind of be evangelical and try to convince people that this was real, to now, we have people, knocking on our door every day.
Yeah, I mean, AI is a fad, Ron, just like the internet was in
Exactly.
2000. Yeah.
Exactly. You kind of can't blame people, because um, there's so much hype around AI now, and there has been hype around other things before that were, pretty ephemeral. So I get it. Uh, but people are smart, and they've figured it out. And I would say, the change in the last 2 years is more significant than I would have ever imagined. I was at lunch the other day, and there were a bunch of lawyers at the table, and they were using like non-trivial AI terminology correctly. I mean, and just in casual conversation, I just couldn't believe it. So the world is changing pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, we were just talking to a law firm this morning too. Yeah, they're interested, although they need access to obviously real case law and not Chat GPT making up case law, as
That is true.
we saw last year.
Yep.
So in your role, have you faced any ethical dilemmas regarding AI projects that challenge your views on the technology's impact on society, or anything concerning to you at all?
Yeah, I mean, without question, I would say at least once or twice a year, we have to wrestle with some pretty heavy ethical questions. In fact, we actually turned down our first client. He was building in the beginning. He was very um, uh, indirect in what he wanted, and as we peel back the layers of it, it became clear that this computer vision system was essentially a targeting system, like a weapons targeting system. So we've walked away from a number of deals over the years. Things around, you know, like we've had people try to help. Have us help them build AI systems to increase the amount of money people are willing to gamble. I mean, that's just something I'm not even remotely interested in.
Yeah.
Weapons systems, things like that. But it's even it's actually more subtle than that. And I'll be the first to say, like, I'm not going to throw any stones when it comes to AI ethics, because honestly, it wasn't something I took very seriously until maybe 8 years ago. And the reason is I grew up just trying to build AI systems that would work, and they didn't work. They kind of worked, and sometimes they would exceed our expectations, but most of the time they wouldn't. So ethics was something I didn't really care about. I always use the analogy, it was like the internet. When they built the internet, they were just trying to get it to work. And then they went back and layered security on top of it because they were, they didn't know if it was going to pan out. And now with AI, now that we really do have these powerful systems, we take it really, really seriously. And the thing that I think a lot of people miss is that these AI systems are they like take a predictive system, it's going to replicate whatever bias is in your data. So we've built
Yeah.
systems that were like housing valuation, auto valuation systems, where we had to do a lot of work to take out sort of bias data that was baked in going back decades when there were sort of unofficial sort of racial segregation within cities and things like that. And if you don't take the time uh, to clean up your data and remove the bias, you'll build an AI and it will mimic all of those biases, and you can't pretend that it's this impartial expert judge. It's just replicating the bias that was there before.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't understand, right? But totally true. You got to get the data cleaned up first. People do understand garbage in, garbage out for sure. And how do you think AI is going to be employed in engineering? And I mean things like mechanical engineering and civil engineering,
Mhm.
not computer engineers. Anything interesting there?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be applied. I think it'll be kind of like the internet in the sense that there will be no internet companies. There are no internet companies, right? They're just the internet, and every company uses it. There won't really be any AI companies. It will be so pervasively integrated into everything we do. And we're at sort of this junction between sort of perceptive AI and generative AI. um, the way I think about it is up until about 2015, the things that you could do with machine learning and
Hmm.
AI were, for the most part, very narrow, and computer vision and natural, and then NLP, natural processing, really those hard areas were sort of solved from a perceptive perspective, and we could understand images, and we could understand text, and we could understand handwriting, and we could understand speech and things like that. And then the generative phase, which we're really in right now, is about being able to create um, uh, outputs that match your training distribution. The next phase is going to be much more, a lot of people talk about agentic, but I think that's a given. You'll hear physical AI thrown out a little bit, and that's really about embodiment. And there's been a huge amount of breakthroughs within robotics, especially with certain techniques like diffusion. And so I think um, every field is going to be impacted to this. And if you look at engineering fields like mechanical or otherwise, we're going to have much, much more sophisticated capabilities. And the thing that I point to, which we just spoke about, is if we're able to infer, you know, protein structure from raw amino acid sequences, and that is, there were people who thought that that was unsolvable in the sense that there wasn't a one-to-one mapping. It was like emergent behavior, right? Or almost chaotic behavior. You can imagine, like, weather systems. The fact that that is solvable using AI, there will be almost no field unaffected by AI over the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, given that and this current landscape of AI, obviously, look, you've got to balance risk management versus innovation. And you talked about in the internet, oh, we made the internet started working, and then whoops, we got to put security on. And that's kind of what's going on right now. And something my company does, obviously, like
Mhm.
cybersecurity for Gen AI is one of the things we do.
Yep.
But do you think there are other risks that are being downplayed or ignored by the industry right now in favor of innovation?
I think, all the big questions around AGI or, um, ASI, artificial superintelligence, and align, quote unquote, the alignment questions. How do we keep a system that is probably certainly within the next, few years going to be vastly more intelligent than us? How do we keep that aligned with our human interests? It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Scott Aronson, the quantum computer professor at the University of Texas, he made a joke about when he was on my podcast about, imagine a bunch of orangutans and they invent humans. And they say to themselves, well, this is great. We can have these really, intelligent humans do stuff for us. We just have to keep them aligned with our orangutan values. And the question is, well, how do you think that would work out for the orangutans? So to me, that's probably the biggest question out there is alignment. Where will things go? I don't think it's a given. A lot of the dark scenarios that people assume will play out, because I do think there is a difference between sort of biological life with evolutionary selective pressures and AI that may not have those exact same type of replication pressures. But that's, to me, probably the biggest open question within AI right now.
Yeah, well, certainly a lot of people are talking about AGI, and we'll almost certainly have something that looks and smells like AGI before it's really AGI. It'll still be statistical, not actually thinking and conscious. But it can look.
Yeah.
ChatGPT has already fooled people into thinking that it's conscious. So
Yeah. Well, and the
obviously,
problem
that's
there is if somebody could just lay out what, consciousness is, just describe it, or just
yeah,
describe, how we think exactly, or what intelligence is, then we'd have some benchmark to work against. But of course, nobody can do that. And so we'll just have to, it's that old joke about you'll know it when you see it.
yeah. Well, look, I mean, we talked about before. There's a lot of AI hype. Are we setting ourselves up for another AI winter or giant trough of disillusionment, or we keep
That's a
heading
gr-
up over the next couple of years?
no, that's a great question. I don't think there'll ever be another AI winter, just for the simple reason that we have capabilities now with an AI, perceptive, generative, et cetera, that are so valuable, nobody's ever going to walk away from those. Now, do I think we're going to have, that classic tech hype cycle? Yeah, I do. I think there's going to be an enormous amount of money invested into AI in the next few years. Not all of it will see a return on the investment, but the amount of money being invested by some of the largest companies in the world is so staggering that it's almost impossible for them to walk away from some of this level of investment. For example, Microsoft alone says they're going to put 80 billion into data center development and power generation just this calendar year. So
Yeah.
I think there'll be a hype cycle, but I don't think there'll be a winter again.
Yeah. Now, for small and medium businesses, what kinds of use cases are you seeing out there that are super cool? I'm not talking about the obvious ones like, hey, it's transcribing my meeting, like
Right.
something cooler than that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things. It really, really, really varies. I mean, most companies probably could benefit from something like, leveraging language models with, RAG. That's very, very common. And you could build a system that would be internal to answer health insurance questions for employees
Yeah.
or support, legal document discovery internally and things like that. We see that a lot, but I'm actually a much, much bigger proponent of what I call domain specific AI for companies. And that's essentially building AI capabilities that provide real market differentiation for you that either leverage data that you have that is unique or some other aspect of your product offering, and to provide um, some people call it narrow domain specific AI. And so that's this idea that you could. I'll give you some concrete examples. We built a trading system for a company that is now trading billions of dollars on a monthly basis with this system. And that system is not very smart. It can do one thing, it can make intelligent trading decisions. But the return on that investment has been hundreds of millions of dollars since they deployed it. We've built AI systems that can detect and correctly predict breast cancer risk. That's all it can do. It's in some ways very, very, very dumb, but that system is going to save hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives. And I could go on and on. We've done over 100 production deployments in our 7+ years, and what I think the mistake a lot of companies make is they want to just focus on generative AI. And it's like somebody gave them a hammer, this generative AI hammer, and everything looks like a nail. And I think we're already starting to see a little bit of the disillusion with that. And I would counsel all of those companies to look really hard at domain specific AI in ways that they can leverage their own sort of internal data to have, real value and market differentiation.
Yeah, that's great advice. And what are your some of your favorite reads or ways to keep up with AI besides our podcasts?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's tough, I'll be honest. I follow a bunch of people on Twitter that I think are, or X or whatever it's called these days, that um help really kind of focus on important white papers.
Mhm.
At Kung Fu AI, we have something called Lab Day. Every Friday, we we do no billable work, and we get together and we do white paper sessions, we do prototyping, and we review libraries, and we essentially share notes. That has been indispensable just as a way for us to communicate and share what we're seeing. There are some newsletters out there that I think are really great. One of them that comes to mind is Nathan Lambert. If you're interested in natural language processing, he has a really fantastic newsletter.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been involved in that for a super long time. My thesis advisor was Bill Woods, who invented Lunar, which is one of the first NLP systems for moon rocks. Awesome. Well, let's head to our advice section then. So let's give advice to some listeners who are college students. They want to use AI. They want to learn about AI. Like what kind of classes should they take? What should they do? What kind of job should they get? When they
Ooh,
graduate to do that.
yeah. Well, one of the things that I think we have to address is there are a lot of people worried that AIs are going to do away with programming, or do away with the machine learning engineer or AI engineer. I really don't share that perspective. I think it's still very much a really great career path. Um, um, AI is increasingly statistical, like you mentioned earlier. So I think having a really good grounding in statistics, obviously linear algebra. Um, the thing that I think that we do at Kung Fu AI that may be a little bit different is we focus really hard on the software skills. So um, if you want to come work and build production AI systems with us, you have to care. You can't just care about the AI. You have to care about good software development practices. So we really focus on a screen for things like good design and reliability and scalability. And to achieve those, you have to care about traditional software practices. So I'd highly encourage people, um, if you're interested in working in AI and building things that go into production, uh, having really strong software skills are a must.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And on the other end of the spectrum, CEOs running companies hadn't really done much with AI yet. Any advice for CEOs adopting AI, including Gen AI?
Yeah, I would say most companies haven't done much with AI yet, if anything at all, and they're trying to figure out how to get started. I would recommend a couple things. One is, as I already mentioned, don't fall for the Gen AI trap. Don't think everything has to be Gen AI. Two, um, sometimes the things that you think are most important or that will be the easiest or have the highest return on investment really aren't. And people will conflate these things and they'll invest a lot of money into a moonshot that has, mediocre success and therefore mediocre return because most companies have done very few things in AI. There's just a ton of low hanging fruit. And so I think there's opportunities for companies to do really interesting things. And I would say if you don't see at least a 10x return on the initiatives, don't even consider it. And last thing I'd say is, um, have a little bit of a strategy. Just don't go out there and do AI so that you can check a box and say that you did AI and claim success. Put some time into understanding what um, you could do as a company that would differentiate yourself, and don't just invest in things that are table stakes and not going to provide you with the return on the investment that you really need.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't get to ask this question that often, but you've founded multiple companies. So, do you have any advice for founders out there?
Yeah. Uh, Understand it's a lot harder than it looks, and most startups are going to fail, and I've gotten my fair share of failures in the past. I feel like I've seen and done it all, and so um, only found a company if you really feel that you have no other option. Like you're just so driven and you're so passionate, and you have something that you want to bring into existence in the world, and you can't find any other way to do it, then do it. But just realize it is a lot of tough work, as you know, and that most of them are going to end in failures. But if everything I just said doesn't scare you off, great. That's the kind of person that should go start a company.
Awesome. Great advice. Great advice. So now we turn to our last section, which is underrated or overrated. So I'll mention something and you tell me if you think it's underrated or overrated and why. So first is the book, The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. Underrated or overrated?
Honestly, my opinion on that book has changed over the last 20 years. When I read the original when it came out, I just read the new version, and I think net we will look back in 50 years and be pretty shocked at how much he got right. And if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I would have said Ray is not looking too good for his 20, 30 bets. So I have to go with it's probably underrated.
Yeah. ChatGPT as a tool for businesses, underrated or overrated?
That is so nuanced because I really feel most people underutilize things like Claude and ChatGPT, and they use them. It's a lack of imagination, and so I net still think it's underrated because most people are just barely tapping the utility they could be getting out of these services.
Yeah, a lot of companies are blocking it too, so it's not an option, right?
That's true.
Austin, Austin, Texas for barbecue, maybe versus Dallas, underrated or overrated?
That's no question. Austin's the best. We have Franklin's and 100 other places. I don't even want to consider underrated there. We're the it's no question. Austin's the best.
Craft beer, underrated or overrated?
I like beer, but I'm not a huge beer guy, so overrated.
Kung fu as a competitive sport, underrated or overrated?
Oh, these are good. You're killing me. Underrated. It's got to be. It's underrated.
Yeah, it's the name of your company. So,
Exactly.
kombucha, underrated or overrated?
No, overrated.
AI in healthcare, underrated or overrated?
Right now, probably overrated. Soon it will be underrated. Right? We're getting our center of gravity under us still, and all of the really amazing things are um are being developed right now, and they haven't landed, but they're coming really soon.
All right, Texas Longhorns chances at a bowl game this year, underrated or overrated?
Well, we made the playoffs, so I think we can check that one as done and done well. We didn't make the national championship, but we came close. So,
Vegan hamburgers, underrated or overrated?
um, they're actually pretty good. So I'd say underrated.
And last but not least, the movie The Godfather, underrated or overrated?
Oh, it's the best movie ever made, in my opinion, hands down. So it's so esteemed. I'm not sure you could say it's underrated. But if I had to pick between those, I would say underrated. It's the best movie ever.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ron. This has been Ron Green, co founder and CTO of Kung Fu AI. Ron, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Alec. It was really a pleasure.